the reference video, it was mentioned that so when the birds of prey came down to basically try to eat the animals that Abram had cut in half, they kind of compared that to Egypt trying to always basically threatening to thwart the will of God, which you can kind of compare that to how they were enslaved by the Egyptians for hundreds of years, but that still didn't stop God from doing what he said he was going to do. Something I want to point out of the immeasurable kindness of God, the immeasurable kindness of God's heart, he explained all of this or told this to Abraham. Now we need to understand something. Like sometimes I feel like we get it twisted and we be getting out of line sometimes because we think God owes us an explanation. He does not. Even dare say that he didn't owe Abraham an explanation, but he explained that to him. You know, when he came to him in all honesty and sincerity, and he said, God, I need a promise, I need a sign, I need assurance. He gave it to him. He didn't have to, but he did. You need to learn patience because there are things going on that you don't fully understand. And I even dare say that you won't ever fully understand. And another thing, I feel like some people have really messed themselves up because they feel like, again, like they are owed an explanation. But what people don't understand sometimes is that our minds, our carnal human minds, can't always comprehend what God is doing, why he does what he does. It's always for us to understand why he does what he does. So imagine if it was somebody else and God had told them, oh, by the way, yeah, you're going to have descendants and you're going to have all this land, but that's not happening anytime soon. It's not going to even be in your lifetime. Oh, and by the way, your descendants are going to be enslaved for 400 years. The average person would probably break down crying. Sometimes we just need to swallow our pride and our arrogance and our ego. And we need to accept what God allows. We need to accept what God allows. We need to accept his will for what things are going to be, how things are going to go. We need to accept the fact that God is sovereign, God is all-knowing, and there will be times, well, all the time probably, that we won't be able to understand why he does what he does, and we don't need to. Most of us couldn't wrap our head around it anyways, and even if we knew, because of the weight of it, we probably would lose our mind. I have this saying that goes, sometimes we need to throw things or leave things in the unknown, because sometimes it's just better for us to not know. God could be saving you by not telling you or by not trying to let you comprehend what he's doing. Like you could be thinking to yourself, oh, well, God, why did you let this happen? Or why did that person do this? Or why, whatever, this, that. And if he really told you, like I said, some people will probably lose their minds, or they just still wouldn't be able to grasp it all. There's just some things that you're not going to be able to handle. And like I said, he could be trying to save you from all of that. But some people, for some reason, they can't grip that. And I think it's because sometimes, you know, people going through life, you know, hey, life has been cruel to some people, and they have built these lifestyles, these mentalities that won't allow them to tap into that concept. So anyways, after God told Abram all of that stuff, something else really miraculous happens. And again, like I said, the first time I read this, I was like, God, what in the world is going on here? But anyways, so in the 17th verse, it says, when the sun had set and the darkness had fallen, a smoking fire pot with a blazing torch appeared and passed between the pieces. And on that day the Lord made a covenant with Abraham and said, to your descendants I give this land. So that was part of the 18th verse, kind of at the end. And then he starts listing basically the land that he was going to give Abraham. So basically that fire pot, to me, it was like a literal representation of God. It was literally like a physical, I want to say, manifestation of God in that place. Like if you've ever heard people say stuff like, oh, the fire of God, that was like a literal representation of him as he passed through those halves. That was literally him passing through the halves solidifying his part of the covenant that he had just told Abram in the previous scriptures. Something that the reference video pointed out, that I also want to point out, was that technically this covenant, this agreement, was one-sided. It was a one-sided covenant, or it was unilateral. Like I said before, a literal manifestation of God passed through those halves. Abraham never passed through those halves of the animals. Abraham never stated no parts of his agreement, or no parts of the agreement, no parts of the covenant. He never said anything, well, because he was in a deep sleep at the time. And the Lord knew exactly what he was doing when he allowed that to happen. Because he didn't state any part of his side of the agreement, there was literally nothing he could do to default the covenant, or to default on the covenant. Nothing he could do to ruin the terms of the covenant, because he didn't state anything. Literally God's covenant to Abraham, and because God was the only person, or the only of the two parties between him and Abraham who stated anything on their side of the covenant, and since God is not a man that he should lie, there was literally no way for him to go back on his word, for it to be null and void, for it to not happen, for it to not come to pass. Literally set in stone. Once he said it, there was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It was, he said it, period, and it was going to happen. It reminds me of how there is nothing we can do to earn God's love, grace, mercy, protection, salvation. He gives it to us. There was nothing that Abraham had to do. This was something that God made to him.